Welcome to the Unconditionally Worthy Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Adia Gooden, a licensed clinical psychologist who believes deeply that you are worthy unconditionally.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Unconditionally Worthy Podcast. I am recording this at a time when I'm sort of getting back into the groove of working and momming and balancing everything. Sleep is getting better over here in the Gooden Stanford household, but we're still working on it. So I'm noticing my cognitive function is not quite as sharp as I'd like it to be. Hopefully, by the time you listen to this episode, everything is going well. Baby is sleeping through the night, and we are all good. That is my hope. Yeah, so I am really excited about the episode today. It's another coaching call. So I have another audience member who volunteered to be coached by me, and I am thinking about this as an opportunity to share with someone what I would have shared with my younger self. So Dionne is my guest, and she talks about her experience with being a first generation immigrant, so her parents immigrated, of having imposter syndrome, of feeling like she needs to be the best in order to be worthy. And we really get into the challenges of that, as well as some mindset shifts for her as she lets go of this idea that only accomplishments and influence will make her worthy. I think it's a really powerful episode. And no matter what life stage you're in, I'm imagining that you're going to resonate with what we talk about. We talk about imposter syndrome. We talk about, a really unique way to kind of tap into self-compassion. And so I think you're going to find it helpful. So listen in and be sure to DM me or send me an email. I'm at Dr. Adia Gooden on Instagram, and let me know what you think. Hello, and I am really excited to welcome Dionne Regis to the podcast. Dionne is currently a master's student in the Clinical and Counseling Department at Teachers College, Columbia University, specializing in school counseling, with a focus towards late adolescents and young adults. Dionne hopes to pursue a PhD in clinical or counseling psychology, with research dedicated to the effects of media on minoritized youth self-esteem. In her free time, Dionne enjoys being one with nature, dancing, reading self-help books, hanging out with friends, and spending time with family. And I am really excited to have Dionne on the podcast because this is another special episode where I am coaching a member of the audience. And Dionne has graciously volunteered to be coached on this episode of the podcast. So welcome, Dionne.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And I'm excited to sort of get into it today. I think, we had a pre-call, and a lot of the things that you shared that you struggle with related to self-worth are things that I also struggled with in terms of self-worth. And so I'm sort of thinking this as a little bit of an opportunity to share with you what I would have shared with my younger self, right? Like what I wish somebody had told me when I was your age. And I think that people are going to find it really helpful regardless of what age or life phase and stage they're in. So I am hoping we can start with you sharing a bit about your own self-worth journey and sort of where you're at in your journey right now.
Yes. So in terms of my self-worth journey, it has definitely been a roller coaster. So just a bit of background on me. I grew up in a first generation household. So my parents immigrated to America in the late 80s. So basically everything in my life has been a first for me. And because of that, it has left a lot of feelings of imposter syndrome and always feeling the need to have to up myself or up the game one, and just kind of be like, I have to do better than I did the day before, the month before, etc. And I think right now I'm currently pursuing my master's degree, and I'm very grateful for this step. But again, I realized that even in undergrad, and as I've been trying to get this career that I'm so passionate about, I realized that it's been creating spaces where there's people who do not look like me, basically, and and creating communities where I would feel like, I have to work extra hard, not only for myself and to prove that I belong in a space, but also that I'm creating a door for other people who look like me to enter through that door. So I think in my battle of self-worth and my self-worth journey, I feel like as I've been reaching these, like growing through this ladder, I've been losing confidence in myself in terms of like, when I'm in classes, I always, especially in high school, where it was a predominantly like Black, Hispanic community, I was always the first one to raise my hand. I was always the first one to feel really proud and like just put my voice out there. But I realized that as I've been growing up, I've been kind of retracting myself and kind of feeling like, is what I'm saying matter? Like, is what I'm doing, is my, like, everything in my process doesn't matter, and is kind of taking me aback, I feel like, a bit. So lately I've just been battling like feelings of self-esteem, like feelings of imposter syndrome, feelings of just feeling negative at times, feeling hopeless at times, feeling like, is this really worth it? And then you throw in social media now that we have, and I see, and most of the times I'm comparing myself to other Black women, and I see like, this person bought a house by the age of like 21, 23, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, am I on the right path? So then it becomes to a point now where even when I do have successes, even when I do have wins, whether major or small, I don't see it as enough. And then it just continues to be this battle of, okay, I have, like, sure, I did this. I can like celebrate it for 1 minute, but I have to do more. I have to keep going. And now I'm at this phase where I'm like burnt out, basically. So that's been really difficult for me, and having to battle all of these emotions.
Yeah, I mean, it's heavy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just sort of imagine you racing up a mountain with a heavy backpack of, I'm the first, I got to be better than, I got to prove I deserve to be here. I got to be the representative and make sure the door's open for everybody else who's coming behind me. I got to make sure my parents know that their sacrifices are worth it. I got, right? Like, whew, right? And meanwhile, you're not like leisurely hiking up the mountain. You're like, let's go. Like, let's get to the top of this mountain as quickly as possible. Right? So it's like, oh, yeah, I think I understand why you feel burned out. I get it. I think like that makes so much sense.
Yeah. There's moments where I'm just like, can't breathe, you
know? Well, maybe we could start there. Like, let's just take a deep breath. Literally, let's take a deep breath together. Okay. Ready? Inhale. Sigh it out. Maybe let's do one more. Inhale. Those of you listening, I hope you're breathing with us, because I think that when we are in this race to the top, when we feel all of this pressure, we do sort of run out of breath. We hold our breath and we feel like we can't catch our breath because we're going so fast and there's all this coming at us, and we just got to keep going, because if we stop, what does that mean? Right? So even just breathing can be powerful. Even though it's so simple, right? Because people just take a deep breath. And sometimes that's said as like, calm down, take a deep breath. It's not that serious, right? And so it feels invalidating. And I don't want to invalidate you, because I think what you're feeling is very valid and really understandable. And if we can reconnect to our breath, right? This thing that we're always doing, but sometimes forget and sometimes lose touch with, that actually can be the beginnings of slowing down to connect to the part of ourselves that's more than the next accomplishment, the next comment in class, the next grade, the next social media post or like or whatever. And so if you notice yourself like in that, I feel like I can't even catch my breath, a place to start is to just deep inhale, deep exhale, hand on the chest. It's okay, right? Like, even telling yourself it's okay. And sometimes that might come at the end of the day, right? When you're tired and you've been in class and you felt yourself shrinking, as you were saying, and you thought, oh my God, I didn't know the answer to that, or I didn't totally understand everything that was being said, and I'm not used to this because I used to be the smartest kid in class, and
Mm-hmm.
right, like can you let yourself just, it's okay, right? Like it's okay. So that could be sort of a just a starting place. What is that? So how do you feel after taking a couple deep breaths with me, and what do you think about that as something that you could offer to yourself when you're feeling particularly overwhelmed?
I think it's helpful. I think I'm happy you had me do it more than once, because even like on the first breath, like I felt my breath really jagged, like very
Mm,
much like it was coming out, but it wasn't like smooth. It was like all like I guess like the pent up energy in my breath. It was like,
mm-hmm.
but then as I did it again, I realized like it was more calm, and it centered me and allowed me, okay, let's just focus on self. So I think that was very helpful. And I think even like when I do it in the future, like placing my hand on my chest to kind of just like
Mm-hmm.
center myself and kind of like be with myself, I think that would be really helpful, because I
Yeah,
don't do that a
great.
lot.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in the midst of the busyness of the world to forget. And, take as many breaths as you want, right? You can take 10 breaths. You can spend 5 minutes. You can spend 10 minutes. So just giving yourself that space to just breathe and
Mhm.
pause, I think can be really helpful. I mean, I think, so many people are going to resonate with the story that you're sharing, right? The story
Mhm.
of being, you know, a young Black woman, of being who's achieving highly, who's feeling like you got to prove that you're worthy, who's experiencing imposter syndrome, who's feeling like you got to be a good representative. So many people relate to that. I know that I certainly have gone through that and experienced some of those pressures that you're feeling. And I think it's also common to have that increase as you sort of go up in terms of education, because as you said, you started, most of your classmates were other students of color, so it was sort of a comfortable space, more of a comfortable space, and you felt confident
Right.
in your skills and your abilities, and you were like, I'm going to say that answer, I'm going to be in front of the class, right? Like that was an identity, I think, for you. And then as things get more challenging, you go to college and you're like, ooh, I'm not the only smart one, right? I remember my freshman year. So I went to Stanford for undergrad, and
Mhm.
freshman year orientation weekend, they had us like in this big auditorium, and they were like, all the freshmen, they were like, raise your hand if you were valedictorian. I was not valedictorian, but like a
Wow.
third, right? Like a third or a
Wow.
fourth of people like raise their hand. And it was sort of like, look around, like you are no longer the only, or you are no longer the best. And the point wasn't to like beat us down, but to just be like, hey, like this is a different space, right? You worked
Mhm.
hard to be here, but now you're in community with everybody else who worked really hard to be here. And so there is a need to sort of release the identity of I'm the best, or I'm the smartest, or I'm the one who has the answer fastest, because
Mhm.
it feels scary to sort of lose that identity in the midst of everybody is really smart and really hardworking, and I no longer stand out for that.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's some of what you've experienced.
No, I mean, it's definitely that. I wasn't valedictorian in high school, but I was like in the top 5 of like my whole class. So like going from that and then going to a university that was in the South, and then also like having kids who are also in the top 10 of their class come, it was very much like, okay, like I have to find a new identity, except like I didn't know what that new identity was. And I think I still struggle with that, because like so much of my life, and like love my mother, but has contributed to this, is like, oh, like being smart is what makes you you. And like, um,
Mm,
I think that's definitely hard, because I felt like up until high school and even like right before entering college, that was something I was very proud of, was like, I have like these top grades, like I have like the honors like that you get to prove for it. And then now I'm like in a space where honestly, it's fine if I say it, but like in my first year of college, I got an F in calculus. And that
mm,
brought my self-esteem so down, because I was like,
mm,
I didn't even know what a C was before that. So
mm,
before, like, so having to like I think that for me was the moment where I was like, who am I? And then to this point, I'm still like, okay, like, who am I?
Yeah, right. And now you're at an Ivy League
Yes.
university doing a master's. And I heard you say it doesn't feel like it's enough,
Yes.
right? Like even getting into a master's program right after college at an Ivy League, an excellent
Yes.
school, your mind says, I said, but that's not enough,
Yeah.
right? You got to do the next thing, right? So part of it is watching our mind, because our mind will continue to say, that's not enough. That's not
Yeah.
good enough. You got to do it more. And for me, that looked like racing to finish my PhD, finishing it, defending my dissertation, and realizing even that wasn't enough.
Right.
And I was sort of heartbroken because I was like, this was supposed to be it. This was supposed to do it. And I know you want to get your PhD or your doctorate. And so I want to help you get off that track before you walk out of your dissertation defense and start sobbing like I did, right? I don't want you to have to go through that. And you can certainly still get your doctorate, right? But let's try to detach it from your sense of worthiness, your belief that this is what will finally make me worthy. So what do you think, that's a good way to ask this question. What do you think keeps you attached to the idea that more accomplishments or perfect educational performance is what makes you worthy?
I think initially it started with my family, like initially through high school and then like even parts of college. It was kind of this like, I just really want to make my mom proud. I want to make my aunt proud. Just kind of, again, being the first to like do everything was just like, I just want them to see me excel. But then in college, I had this transition where I realized like pre-med was no longer for me. I really loved counseling, had like a whole mental breakdown about it, cried about it. And that started my new transition of like, I'm actually doing something for me for once. But then those thoughts of like still wanting to do like excellent and still like wanting that praise, like it still continued, but it was no longer from my family, it was from myself. I was still putting that pressure on me, even though my mom had literally told me that like just do what you have to do in order for you to feel like successful. So it was no longer that like pressure from my mom of feeling, oh, like I'm gonna let my mom down now. I think now it's like I don't even know, like, am I gonna let myself down, or am I just like feeling like, oh, I'm just not going to look good to like people on the outside now. So I'm still trying to figure out if it's more of just like, oh, I just want whoever's in my vicinity to see that I don't look like a failure. I think that's what it is, because I know if I think about just like my inner self, like my inner self is like, you need a break, just chill out. But then I think the outer self is like, I think it's like if I talk to someone, like I want them to see that, like, you know, I'm not just doing nothing. And I think that mindset also is like, because I've gone to really good institutions, I now have people around me who are like, yeah, I just did this internship. I'm working with this bank. I just got into, what is it called? Like McKenzie or McKenna, something like that. So it's like, so like, yo, I'm always hearing these things and now I'm just like, okay, you need to step it up. So
I get the feeling. I know the feeling, right? It's like, for me, it's like, oh, that person's on Forbes under 40, 40 under 40. And so is that. And at some point I was like, ooh, or like first it was 30 under 30. And at some point I was like, oh shoot, I'm 30. Like I missed it. Like I'm not going to make it. You know? But I get it, right? You sort of like look around you and you're like, they're doing these impressive things. But part of what I want to tell you is they're looking at you the same way. Right? Like they're looking at you and saying, wow, Dionne went straight into a master's program in an Ivy League university. Like she's going to have her master's in like a couple of years. Like that is so impressive. Like that is how they are looking at you. The challenge is that you don't see you that way. And it was
Yeah.
interesting that you said, I don't want people to see me as a failure.
Yeah.
What do you think would happen if people saw you as a failure?
Ooh. I feel like, well, the first thing I thought of was just like me like turning into a hermit and like hiding my face from the world. But I think what that really says is that I it's a disappointment on my own character. I feel like I kind of feel
Mm,
it's more of a disappointment in myself if other people see me as a failure. I
okay.
think yes,
Okay. So you'd feel sort of ashamed and then also
yes,
disappointed with yourself.
yes.
Okay. What do you think it means to be a failure?
Um, I think for me, being a failure is I think it's tied into what I view as success. For me, I view success as I'm contributing something to society and to the world where people will be able to recognize my work and my name, and the pleasures that I get out of it. I think for me, when I use the word failure, it's the opposite of that, which is I'm not being recognized for what I'm doing, or I'm not getting the credit for what I'm doing. I'm not hearing people say, wow, Dionne, what you're doing is inspiring or your work is influential. I feel like that's such a big word nowadays. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I like I think for me it's like, am I being purposeful with the time that I'm given on this earth? Like, well, am I making the most out of it? Like, will I be able to contribute something great to society? And I think that's for me is like, I feel like if I don't do that in some, I don't know, my mind thinks of like some big way, like I don't know, like a Oprah, a Meghan Markle, I don't know, somebody. But if I don't do it in that way, then I'm not good enough.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So I have two questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with the first one. The first one is, or it's sort of an observation.
Mm.
You're wanting recognition and acknowledgement for what you do,
Mm.
while you are overlooking and invalidating what you do.
Sounds like an oxymoron.
Uh-huh. Well, often the thing that we want most from the world is the thing that we are withholding from ourselves.
Mm.
And so my suggestion to you is that you start recognizing yourself,
Mm.
right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
searching for it in the world. Meanwhile, you're saying, that's not good enough. Whatever. Yeah, you went
Yeah.
to, right? Like you're
Yeah.
being kind of rude to yourself, being like, master's program, whatever. Who cares about that? That's not good enough. You didn't buy a house, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, what would it look like to start saying, wow, like I graduated college, I got into a great master's program, and I am like working diligently to learn about something that's going to help me help people. Like I
Right.
feel good about that. Like I really have persevered and I have put my mind to it and I have put my energy to it and my time to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I am doing this. Like what would that feel like, do you think, to acknowledge yourself more?
I think as you were saying those things, I think the first thing that popped into my head is that if I say it to myself, I don't believe it, which
Mm,
I'm like, as I was like thinking, like while you were talking, I was like, why do you not believe that about yourself? Like, why is it
mhm.
easier for people to tell you that? But like you, like if you say it, if I said it exactly the way you said it, I probably would just laugh at myself in my head, which is like sad.
Mm,
But I don't know why.
mm,
Yeah. I think because like my mindset has always just been on a goal oriented or a driven mindset that like I just never took time to actually say, what you did was enough today. Like, look
mm,
at all the things you did today. And I think that's another thing. I don't even look at all the things I do in a day. I just do it and then feel tired and then go to bed, wake up, and just go again.
And probably think about the things that you didn't do.
Yeah. And think of the things I didn't do, right? Yes.
So that really might be your start, right? Like at the end of the day, spending some time thinking about what did I do today? Right. And it doesn't always have to be like, oh, I finished this paper or I did that. But it's like was volunteering or I was, doing some counseling work with a young person and I helped them have an insight. Right. Or I, got a great idea for what I want to write for this next paper. Or I, like whatever. I helped my mom or my parent, or I tutored someone, or I helped, right? But what did I do? What ways did I contribute today? And I don't think that your life has to only be about contribution. I think contribution is really important because it makes life meaningful. But I don't want you to feel like if you have a day where you quote unquote didn't contribute, that means you didn't do enough, right? Because this is the challenge we get in with our mind, because it says, well, then no, you're not contributing enough. Yesterday you contributed 5 times, and today was only 1. And so, right, we can sort of make it this sort of quantitative thing, versus being acknowledging, but also acknowledging the fact that sometimes the biggest way we contribute is just like being with someone and being present with them. Right. I think you'll learn that as you train to be a counselor, right? That, it's the skills. Yeah, that's important. And it's also the being with that can be one of the most powerful aspects of helping people. Right. And so if you could spend some time trying to holistically acknowledge, here's what I did today. Here's how I showed up. Here's how I contributed to myself, to my community, to my family. Here's what I can feel good about today. And start small in a daily way. I think that might help to sort of shift a narrative that's in your head, which is, I don't do enough. I'm never doing enough. I'm not enough. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's really important for me, because even when you were just talking about the example of being with a person versus the skills, I think even in that mindset, I'm definitely the skills person when it comes to my therapy and working on that. I'm like, make sure you got all this. Even when I take classes and we do the work, I'm like, am I using all the correct skills? And sometimes my teachers tell me to, they're like, Dionne, are you just listening to the person? They're like, you're so focused on the skills and what you should apply that you're not fully focusing on what the person is saying at times. And I'm like, I do that to my own self. So, yeah.
Right. And I think, we all, I think, have experienced the power of someone just being with us and truly listening, and how healing that can be. Right. And so I really do, especially since you're becoming a counselor, I want you to remember your most powerful moments as a counselor are going to be when you are very present and you're in being mode versus let me check the box of doing and what I do as a counselor. And so I want you to pay attention to that. Notice when you have those powerful moments with clients and what came before. It was probably you being truly present and hearing something and saying something back to them more than you being like, okay, this is the skill and how do I do the skill? And this is the right way to do the skill. And, okay, let's, and not that that's a bad thing, right? But I want you to balance that with the being part, because I think you're going to find that it's really powerful and energizing and exciting. So that's one thing. So then the second sort of challenge question to you is, you sort of said, I feel like if I don't contribute on the level of Oprah, which my goodness, then I have not I have not used up my time and space in this world good enough. Right? Tell me about, do you have a good relationship with your grandmother?
My grandmother passed away.
Did you have a relationship with her?
Yes, I did. We were really close up until she passed away.
Okay. Tell me about how she contributed to your life and to the world.
I mean, for me, she made me feel seen. When my mom was always very much be smart and do that.
Mm,
I think for our relationship, it was more of like the personal, just like, are you eating well? Are you sleeping
mm,
well? Like, is life okay for you? And I think that I really miss those factors about her, where it's just like, she just cares if I'm alive. Not to say that my
yeah.
mom doesn't care, but she very much is the grandmother feeling of like, eat
Yeah.
more. So
Same with my grandma who also passed away. And I imagine you might relate that it's a big loss to lose someone who loves us that way. It's
yes.
hard not to have them here in this earth, right? So I asked you about your grandmother for one reason, and it's going to lead to something else too.
Mm,
And that reason is, don't you think your grandmother was powerfully impactful when she
I
was
do.
here, even though she probably isn't well known like Oprah?
She was impactful to me. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And probably your cousins, and if you have siblings and your parent, right? Like,
yeah.
she made a significant, meaningful impact on you,
Hmm.
on the world, and the ripple effect of how that affects you and how you affect the world, right?
Hmm.
And you would never ever say, well, I mean, people didn't know her name all over the world, so that means she didn't contribute enough.
Right.
Like, you would never say that about your grandmother, would you?
No, I would not.
Right? And so I point that out because I think it's fine to strive for greatness. I think it's
Mm,
fine to want to be great in the world and to want to have a wide impact. But my concern is attaching that and saying, if it does not happen in this way I have decided I want it to happen, then it means it was nothing. Then
mm.
I did not do enough. Then I am not worthy enough. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, to put all to attach all of like your like this idea of greatness to one label, and whether or not you match that label, that determines everything. I feel, yeah, that's also
Yeah.
just a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure. And when there's like a healthy amount of pressure when we want to achieve highly. And part of it is like, okay, you're motivated, you're energized, you're like, let's do this, right?
Hmm.
But then when it gets too much, which is like, if you don't do this, I don't know, right? Like, oh, you're sick?
Yeah.
You think you want to rest? No, 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 no. You know what I mean? Like, then it's
Yeah.
unhealthy, right? And unhelpful. So we want a balance of like, I really want to impact a lot of people. And I'm excited about the possibility of like really, like having a widespread impact. But when it's a lot
Mhm.
is like, was your name written in a magazine? Well, who cares what you did?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, just even talking about that is like, it's helpful for me because like, I think that has been my mindset for so long. It's just kind of like, oh, well, literally, like, if I like just thinking about all the things that I've done, I'm like, if it's not in a magazine, like, who cares? Like, you still
Uh,
did like a lot of great things. And I mean, I will continue to do a lot of great things, but like, it shouldn't add up to one moment of like, oh, like your name's in the magazine or X, Y, and Z. Like, everything that I am doing, it does matter because like it has already been impacting people. Like, just like even people like that were younger than me in college who like also look up to me, and like I think about those things. I'm like, like there are people who like see what I'm doing and like are like, I aspire to just have that same passion that she has. So I think it's important for me to like continue to remember that, because very easily, like again, like I get back into that mindset. But if I could keep remembering this, like my work, my passions, like all of these things I'm doing, they're worth more than just one label, then
yes.
that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we can expand it beyond, right? Like, there's so many people who have had an impact on your life whose names
Yeah,
are not in magazines.
right.
Your grandmother is one wonderful example. And I chose a grandmother because often the way grandmothers impact us is by their love and is
Yeah.
by how they be with us. right? How they see us, as you said, you felt seen versus like what they are doing, right? You said, yeah, like she was like, are you eating? But it wasn't like, well, she cooked this amazing meal and because it was this meal and it was delicious, that's what, it's like maybe she cooked some amazing meals, but that wasn't the point, right? It was her being, her energy that impacted you the most. And it's true for us too. We may not be grandmothers yet. And it's the energy that we bring into the spaces that we inhabit that are, that's what impacts people, right? That's what blesses people. That's what supports people. And if we only thought that the people who made it in magazines were valuable, like, my gosh, most of us would not be seen as valuable or worthy, which would be very sad. And you would never say to someone else, you would never say to your friend, like, yeah, it's kind of impressive that you're doing this, but like, have you made it into a magazine yet? You would do that.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Is like I look at others and I'm like, wow, your work is so valuable. And like I don't think like that towards them. I'm like, everything you're doing is so great. Like, it doesn't matter if it gets seen by like 100,000 people. Like, as long as it like their work is like benefiting the people that's around them. So I want to apply that same energy to myself,
Exactly. And I think that you have the disadvantage of growing up in the age of social media where the possibilities for influence are just vastly, vastly different than when I was growing up, right? Like when there was no social media, like, yeah, famous people were famous. Like if you were on TV, or you were an actor, like were head of a big company. Like there were those people who were famous, but like reality TV is a fairly new thing. Like when I was in high school, it was like, oh, Real World and Road Rules. Like I don't even know if that happens anymore. But like, it's like reality TV is a new thing. So that's a way of being famous. And then your generation has influencers, right? So who are literally sort of like famous for living their life. And I think another challenge is like, is everyone who's an influencer and has like hundreds of thousands of followers, like, does that mean they're making a significant impact in the life world? Some of them are, but some of them are telling you that like, this is the lip gloss you should buy.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we live sort of in a world right now where impact and influence is a little bit distorted. And our sense of what is like a meaningful contribution can be distorted by the possibility of having 1 million followers on TikTok or Instagram in a way that may or may not be connected to actually doing something meaningful that helps other people.
Right. No, yeah, I definitely, I feel that. Because I think that's another thing with like the social media and just like influence and stuff. I feel like once you have this big following, that like you're automatically like doing something great for society, or like you are very valuable, I guess. But then when you mention like the lip gloss thing, I'm like, oh, I mean, you're selling a lip gloss, or promoting a lip gloss. So I don't know, but yeah.
So some of this is like, how do we challenge or dismantle these ideas that your mind has sold you about what it means to be worthy, right? Because your mind is saying, to be worthy, you have to be on a magazine. To be worthy, millions of people need to know your name. To be worthy, you got to get as many degrees as possible, right? And what I'm helping you to do right now is sort of like, let's look at that. Like, let's look at that, because often these thoughts just live in our heads rent free, and we just believe them. We're like, yeah, that's true. Sure. Yeah, of course. It's just the truth in the background. But when we bring it into the foreground and we actually look at it, we're like, well, do I really believe that? I don't believe that to be true of anybody else. So why would I believe that to be true of myself? Right? Or like, if I really look at it, like, yeah, you can have a lot of influence and not a lot of contribution or impact. And that's not really what I want. Right? Like, and so you start like, let's look at it. And then when you look at it, it's easier to say, I'm going to choose not to believe that anymore. And the thought may still come up, right? We may not sort of eliminate the thought, but it can come up and you can say, no, I'm not believing that anymore. I no longer believe it's true that the only way to impact and have a meaningful contribution in my life is by having millions of people know my name.
Right.
What I can focus on is, how do I have a positive impact on the people I'm interacting with today? What about this one client, this one student I'm sitting with right now? What if I was really present, took deep breaths, and focused on supporting this student as best as I could in this moment? What if that was where I focused my impact energy versus on the big, the shining, the bright lights?
I think, yeah. Just being present. I feel like that's another thing. Because I think my mindset's always so future oriented that, like, even just sitting in the present, and like there's so much people that's around me just like throughout the day, not really thinking about, oh, just like how have I been helping someone today. I feel like if I thought more about that, I feel like that would also bring a sense of gratitude, which usually helps me. Well, I feel like when I'm more gracious and there's more gratitude, I'm more like, I'm actually just helping people. Like, I'm actually just being in the moment. So I feel like that's also something that I should consider and like really think about deeper as well.
Yeah. I think a theme that's coming out of our conversation is slowing down and getting present. We started by talking about the deep breaths. When you feel overwhelmed, can you slow down, breathe deeply, right? Connect to yourself, right? Can you be present with the students that you counsel? Can you focus on sort of like what you did today and what you are doing today versus what am I doing in the future and 10 years from now and 5 years from now? Like, let's get hyper, like, focused on the local, the right now, the present. Like, I am in this moment in this class and maybe I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. I can bring my presence. I can bring my curiosity. I can ask questions. I don't have to perform. I can be present, right? And that's how I can contribute to this class in this moment or with the client, right? And so like really like focusing on the present, I think is going to be helpful. And then I think the last thing I'd recommend is using your grandmother as a voice of compassion. Imagine her guiding you, checking in on you. How are you today? What's going on? I'm so proud of you, right? Like, imagine her voice accompanying you throughout the day, because we want to turn down the volume on this inner criticism, the part of your mind that says, that's not good enough. Why did you do that? I can't believe you're going to be a fit. Like, turn the volume down on that and turn the volume up on your grandmother that says, have you eaten? Why don't you take a rest? It seems like you've done a lot. Why don't you take some time off this weekend? Come here. Let me give you a hug. Right? That part of that voice. Right? Right? And so that's whatever your grandmother sounded like, right? Like, that's what I want you to remember, because that is a voice that says, you're worthy right now. You don't have to do one more thing. You're worthy. I love you. I'm here for you. I see you. Right? And that's the sort of what I want you to be able to connect to and remember. And I think the easiest way to tap into it in the beginning is by using your grandmother's voice. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's helpful, because even when we were just talking about like the grandmother's voice and like my grandmother specifically, it brings back happiness. It brings back a sense like calm, like it's calming, it's soothing, it's like, like I just think about like my grandma's hugs where it's just like your whole body like was tense and it just like falls into your grandmother, and I'm like, that feels so great again.
Yeah. Okay, good. I also was just going to mention, so I have, it's like a micro course and it's on the app Insight Timer. and it's on overcoming imposter syndrome. And so it goes over like some of the things we talked about today, but like a lot, like there's a lot more details. So it's like a 15-day, every day there's like a 10 to 15 minute audio lesson with strategies on overcoming imposter syndrome. And I think that that would be a really good fit for you. So you could, I'll send you the link, and we'll also link it in the show notes for those who are listening and like, oh, I might be interested in that too. But basically, I'm pretty sure it's like $20. So it's way more valuable than $20, but it's just $20. You get access to it. Or if you use the app Insight Timer or are interested, there's lots of courses on Insight Timer. I think you can sign up for an annual membership to access all of their courses for $60. And that'll take you through a year. So I'll send that to you, because I think that that might be another way to, like, if you could listen to a lesson every day for the next 15 days and like really, you know, learning about what's contributing to your imposter syndrome, some of what we talked about, and like learning strategies that help with overcoming it, I think it might be really supportive to you. As you know, just like continuing some of the things that we were talking about in this conversation.
I would definitely tune into that, because I could use all the tips.
Okay. All right. So I'll send that to you. Well, Dionne, thank you so much for being willing to share your experience. I know that so many people are going to relate to the same challenges that you're having. And I really hope that this call, this coaching, is helping you to start shifting your thinking and start, you know, moving towards acknowledging yourself, right? Being present, slowing down, right? And as you do that, you're going to start to tune into, what is it that I'm uniquely here to contribute? It's going to be easier to tap into that when you slow down and you listen to yourself and you're present in the moment and see what emerges. As that happens, you'll get a sense of like, what am I contributing uniquely? And it'll be easier to feel confident in that contribution, which is different than the achievement part of it, like the achievement orientation. Any last questions or thoughts?
No, honestly, this has been really helpful for me, just because it's something I've always struggled with, and like I acknowledged it, but never knew where to go with it. So being able to have this conversation with you has really provided me like a lot of insight. And just like, honestly, I think the word that just keeps sticking out to me right now is compassion, because I like don't have a lot of that to myself. So I'm definitely taking all of this and will continue to apply it. So thank you for that.
You are so welcome. I'm honored to be able to support you in this way, and make sure we stay in touch.
Of course.